So, when the legendary founder of Apple, Steve Jobs, passed away back in 2011, he left behind a fortune worth over $10 billion. But honestly, the real story isn't about the money he made. It's about how he passed it on, because what he did, or maybe more accurately, what he didn't do, is a total masterclass in financial strategy. Let's get into it.
That's right. You heard me. One of the most detail-oriented, visionary CEOs in history had no will. Now, for almost anyone else, that would be a recipe for an absolute nightmare. We're talking public family drama, years of legal fights, and of course, a massive tax bill. But not for Steve Jobs. So that's the $10 billion question, right? How on earth did he sidestep that entire messy public ordeal and make sure his family was protected, private, and totally secure? Well, the answer isn't in what he did, it's in what he managed to avoid.
To really appreciate the genius of Jobs' strategy, first, we've got to look at the standard way of doing things, a will, and understand why, for someone like him, it would have been a complete disaster.
Here's the deal with a will. The second it gets filed, it becomes a public document for anyone to see. That means it has to get validated by a court in this slow and often expensive process called probate. Probate basically turns your private family affairs into a public show, inviting legal challenges from all sides and, you guessed it, the taxman.
There's a great saying that just hits the nail on the head. A will is an invitation for the IRS and the tabloids to come party with your money. And for a guy who guarded his privacy as fiercely as Jobs did, that kind of public circus was an absolute non-starter.
And what a party that would have been. With a 40% federal estate tax, we are talking about a potential tax bill of $4 billion. Just let that sink in. To pay that, his family might have been forced to sell off huge chunks of his Apple and Disney stock, the very assets that built the fortune.
Okay, so if a will was the public, taxable, and messy route, what was the alternative? This brings us to the secret weapon of modern estate planning, the living trust. Unlike a will, a living trust is a completely private affair. Think of it like a secure, private box that you put all your assets into while you're still around. You still control everything, you hold the keys, but legally, the box owns the assets. So when you pass, everything is distributed based on your private instructions, completely skipping the entire court system. I mean, the difference here is just night and day. A will makes your estate public. It drags it through court, and your control ends the moment you're gone. A trust keeps everything private, avoids court, and lets your instructions live on long after. It's the difference between public chaos and private control.
And you gotta know, this wasn't some last-minute move. For years, Jobs was meticulously and quietly moving his most valuable assets, we're talking billions in Apple and Disney stock, his houses, into these private trusts. So by the time he died in 2011, his name wasn't really on them anymore. The whole fortune was locked up, secure, and ready for a perfectly seamless transfer, all outside of the public eye. Okay, so the trust solves the privacy problem and the court problem. But what about that $4 billion tax problem? How did it solve that? Well, it all came down to a simple, incredibly elegant, and 100% legal move that hinged on one specific rule in the U.S. tax code. And here it is, the unlimited marital deduction. This is the linchpin of the entire strategy. It sounds fancy, but the rule itself is simple. You can transfer any amount of money or assets to your U.S. citizen spouse at any time without paying 1 penny in federal estate or gift tax. Now, the tax doesn't disappear forever, it's just deferred. But for that immediate transfer, it is a total game changer. So this is the master stroke. It's so clean. Step 1, he puts everything in the trust. Step 2, he names his wife, Laurene, as the beneficiary. Step 3, the moment he passes away, the assets automatically transfer to her inside that private trust. That transfer triggers the unlimited marital deduction. And just like that, the immediate $4 billion tax bill, poof, it vanished.
And there it is, the punchline.
The total estate tax bill for a $10 billion fortune was a big, fat zero. Not a single penny. It was a private, tax-free, overnight transfer of wealth, all thanks to some incredibly careful and deliberate planning.
The payoff was just total. Not only did they avoid a massive tax bill, but the family was completely shielded from the media, from the courts, and from any pressure to sell off those iconic company shares. It was an absolute victory for privacy, control, and peace of mind.
Now, it's really easy to look at all this and think, okay, that's cool for a billionaire, but what does that have to do with me? And the answer is everything. The core principles here: privacy, control, efficiency. They're universal.
I mean, just look at the alternative. When the music legend Prince died without a will, it set off a 6-year, multi-million-dollar court battle. Aretha Franklin's estate was thrown into total chaos by a bunch of conflicting, handwritten wills they found stuffed in her couch. This is the kind of drama that smart planning, like what Jobs did, helps you completely avoid.
And that really brings us to the biggest lesson of all. A will is basically a public suggestion that you hope a court follows. A trust, on the other hand, contains private, binding instructions that you control. It's the difference between leaving things up to chance and taking absolute control of your legacy.
So the real lesson from the Steve Jobs estate isn't about dodging taxes on billions of dollars. It's about being deliberate. It's about protecting what you've built, no matter how big or small, and making sure your wishes are carried out the way you want, privately and efficiently. It really makes you ask yourself, when the time comes, are you going to leave behind a public problem, or are you going to leave behind clear private instruction?